Hey guys, I know I posted a video yesterday, but that was more of a one-off. It was just sort of stream of consciousness, something that I felt like I really needed to address in the moment. So I know I promised one new video every week that'll be coming out on Mondays, every Monday, aside again from those things that I just really feel strongly about and feel I need to address right away. So today's video is actually about an article that was sent to me by a friend. It's featured on ChristianHeadlines.com, and it's entitled New Study Finds Correlation Between Depression and Same-Sex Parenting. Now normally I wouldn't even address something like this because, let's face it, from a website called ChristianHeadlines.com, it's probably not very impartial. But when I did a little more digging into the article, I figured out that this was actually featured on the Atlantic's website, it was featured on ThinkProgress.com, and it was featured on The Heritage, which I think deserves to be addressed. Now, before we get into the article, it's important to note that there are some extreme impartiality issues and bias issues from the get-go. So this study was conducted by a Dr. Paul Mullins. Important to note that Dr. Paul Mullins is a Catholic priest, and he was actually working at the Catholic University of America when he conducted this study, and the Catholic University of America actually funded this study. So when you think about biases that might enter into the research, I think that's fairly glaring. And another issue that I have with this article, before we even begin, is some of the phrasing that they use. They use phrasing that sort of leads people to believe certain conclusions that it might not actually represent. For instance, the article says that kids who were interviewed for this study were more likely to suffer physical or sexual abuse at the hands of a parent or caregiver. What they don't say is most of these kids were likely adopted. They likely came from group homes or adoptive homes or straight out of an abusive family. So to say that they're more likely to be physically or sexually abused by a parent or caregiver insinuates that they're more likely to be physically or sexually abused by the gay parents or parent that is raising them. I think that's incredibly irresponsible journalism, and it sort of defines what happens in the rest of this article. The article mentions that kids who were interviewed for this study were 37% more likely to feel some sort of social stigma about their family life or their living situation than their heterosexual counterparts. And I would think that would be fairly obvious, but the article also doesn't mention that the initial interviews were conducted in 1997. Our political and social landscape looked completely different in 1997 than it does today. It was more broadly acceptable to demonize homosexuals or homosexual relationships or homosexual families than it is today. And to build on that, just because this individual is suffering hate or intolerance or some sort of bullying at school or their social life or anywhere else because they live in a gay household, the solution to that is not to take them out of the gay household. It's to address the people that are throwing this hate and intolerance at them. We need to be cultivating a society that is tolerant of everyone and not just of what you think is natural and normal. That's the way to reduce the social stigma that these kids are feeling, not by removing them from their households. Another flaw in this study is that the social history of these kids was not taken into account when they started this study in the interviews. For instance, if I was raised in a household where I was physically or emotionally abused by either of my parents and then placed into an adoptive situation where I was being raised by gay parents, that was not taken into account for. In fact, when they studied people who were raised from birth through the second interview by exclusively gay parents, they were no more likely to suffer mental illness or depression problems than those who were raised in heterosexual households. In fact, the number of people who participated in the study who were raised from birth until the second interview by exclusively heterosexual families was 2. And the reason it was 2 is because the sample size for this study was 20. They interviewed kids from 20 families to compile this research. There are 320-something million people in America. I don't know how many gay families there are, but it's sure as hell more than 20. In fact, even the article goes on to say, while the sample size was 20 people, that's indicative of hundreds of families. Hundreds of families, right? Even if it was indicative of 200 families. 200 families out of how many gay families? This study is so incredibly flawed that it can't even be taken seriously. And more than that, the article and the study are probably causing the type of harm that they're purporting to be trying to avoid. This kind of article is the reason that millions of kids wake up every day and feel like they're not good enough and feel like there is something wrong with them and leads them to take their own life. If we really want to solve this problem, we need to address the underlying social conditions that make people around them feel like it's okay to be hateful and intolerant. But seriously, depression, suicidal ideation, and mental health issues are a serious problem. If you or someone you know and love is contemplating committing suicide, I will leave some resources in the description below. I'll leave a link to the phone number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, as well as some other resources for you or the person that you love. If you like this article, please feel free to smash that like button, hit subscribe, share the video all over the internet. It really helps me out. Leave a comment below on what you think, what you'd like to see from this channel. I'll leave a link to the original article in the description if you feel like reading it, and I will see you next time.